I'm Callum, I'm the CEO of WineFi. I'm really excited to be welcoming our new head of investment, Matthew Small, to the company. This is actually day 2 for Matt, and in true WineFi style, we've got him straight in front of a camera. So thank you for putting up with that already. Matt is something of a unicorn hire for us, I think it's fair to say. I'll clarify what I mean on that. But it's very unusual to see a background like yours where you have had, a very successful career in traditional investment, and you've carried that across now to fine wine investing. And that is a really unique profile, very rare profile. And so, we're extremely grateful to be working with you and very excited to be welcoming you to the team as we look to transform fine wine into a viable, if not mainstream, asset class.
Well, thanks for having me, Callum. And yeah, it's been a great couple of days. Busy.
It's been a great 48 hours. Perfect. Well, we're going to do a bit of a Q&A with you. I was about to call it a bit of a Mr. and Mrs., but I think we'll start with Q&A. Just so our audience and our investors, our client base, gets to know you a little bit better. The first question I've got, which should be pretty obvious to anyone that has heard that accent before, which is, where are you originally from?
I'm from Belfast in Northern Ireland.
Very good.
So yeah.
Much of a wine scene in Northern Ireland?
It's actually up and coming. So traditionally, most people drink Sauvignon Blanc and Argentinian Malbec, but now there's a bit of a scene developing there, which is great to see. And actually, how I got into fine wine was through my friend who's based in Northern Ireland.
Oh, fantastic! So not just Guinness, then?
Not just Guinness, although that is a large part of the drinking scene.
Very good. So tell me about how you first got into fine wine then. Can you remember the first great wine that you tasted?
Yeah, I can actually. And it was through Ben, I just mentioned there. He'd come over and I can remember the whole day really clearly. It was 2018. Snow was firing down, one of those super cold winters.
Yeah.
And I live southwest London, and my friend comes up with a great idea. Let's go to northeast London to go to this wine bar, Noble Rot. And it was fantastic. We went in, the fire was lit, really in the cool mood lighting. And we had an Elise Colon Le Perrier. And it's the first time I'd ever had pure Chardonnay champagne, first time I'd ever had a grower champagne. And I drank and I was like, whoa, this is class. And then I think that's what makes fine wine really special, right? I can remember the whole day, who I was with. I can still taste it.
Yeah.
And also that bottle's tripled in price since when I first drank it. So kind of ties in the investment side and the...
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like a lot of people have those stories around fine wine. I remember, probably in my early 20s trying a 1995 Lynch Barge and just going, oh, okay, I get it. I get why people become so interested and passionate about this subject. I want to come back to Noble Rot because I think that's a phenomenal institution. But in terms of, the wine investments that you've made in a previous life, what were the best wines to have invested in rather than just to have consumed? They'd probably correlate, but...
For me, the Super Tuscans have been massive. So I own the 2016 Sassicaia, multiple 100-point scores. Also off the back of that, I bought the 21s, also 100-point Sassicaia. And you can see with Tignanello as well, they've been some of the best performing wines in the wine investment market. And you can see it, they have a cool brand, slightly different to Bordeaux, slightly different story there, but very similar grape varieties. And the price point was considerably less. So you could kind of see there was a bit of a movement happening there. And then 2015-16 onwards, they just took off.
So what do you think has driven that price? Is it just people want their Cabernet Sauvignon fix and move from Bordeaux to Tuscany as a result because the price point is a bit lower? Or do you think there are more factors at play there?
For me, the number one thing that is down to the price is the brand. So I think the brand was slightly different. Bordeaux is kind of your more old school claret drinkers, while Super Tuscans were a slightly more interesting, exciting form of basically the same grape varieties.
Yeah.
I think that was what kind of captured the demand. But also you had people like Alex Ferguson saying Tignanello was his favourite ever wine when it was £40 a bottle. But these things were getting mid 90-point scores. So the quality's always been there.
So as you know, we only at WineFi really consider 7 regions currently investment grade. But that's not to say that certain wines from other regions aren't necessarily investment grade. I'd be curious, what wines or emerging regions do you see as becoming increasingly important or sought after from an investment perspective?
I think the next follow-on would be Spain. We've seen really good performance from Vega Sicilia over the last 12 months. And it kind of has that old world meets new world mix, which I think could be really successful going forward.
Yeah, and I'm as I know you are a bit of a aficionado when it comes to Spanish wine, so I'm quite excited to see that breakthrough. I imagine you've done some producer visits in your time. I am curious to hear which vineyards and producers to visit really stood out. So not just the wine, but the whole experience of actually going to see where the grapes are grown.
For me, Barolo was breathtaking. The landscape's amazing. The hills and the valleys. But also you get the feel there. It's all small producers who are very passionate about what they do. So Bruno Giacosa, for example, was amazing, and I was very lucky to get access there because he very rarely lets you in. And this is a small producer who's now become very popular, but produces some of the best whites and reds in Barolo. And you can see that when you go there, it's very clinical inside, but they also haven't lost track of their heritage of being old producers. And if you look, modern Barolo is only something that's really happened in modern style in the last 10, 15 years. So it's still quite in its infancy since they're kind of producing the less tannic style, which they used to.
What do you think of the view that Barolo is the new Burgundy, which is something that we hear a lot from wine collectors and wine investors in terms of, small production volumes, increasingly sought after wines, and the possible impact that could have on price?
There's a lot of parallels there. So as you alluded to there, the small production volume, the very kind of artisan kind of product, very, very similar to Burgundy. Now, obviously, the grape of Nebbiolo is slightly different, and you might say a little bit more complex, so maybe not as initially accessible to Pinot Noir.
Yeah.
But once you start to understand and enjoy Nebbiolo, it can be way more satisfying. So I think Barolo has a lot of the same attributes to Burgundy, and it's just a matter of time until the world kind of wakes up to it. We saw it whenever China really adopted Burgundy. That's when the price started to go 15, 16, 17. But then Nebbiolo hasn't been adopted as much from China, but then has massive demand from the US. So it's just a matter of time, I think, until Barolo will be the next region to take off like Burgundy.
And then final question for me for now is what are the wines or wine that are on your bucket list that you haven't tried but that you want to try?
I love champagne, so a Krug 08 would be, died and gone to heaven stuff.
Funny that you should mention that, actually.
I was actually very lucky when I was in Barolo. I got to have dinner with Chiara Boscus, one of the main producers there, and she got out a Krug 2000, which was just like drinking brioche. It was fantastic.
Wow.
But the 08 would be
one of our shareholders in WineFi's. So he always talks rapturously about Salon, and he mentioned that he'd had a bottle of Salon 2008 that had ruined champagne for him, because he said, what the problem is, once you've had that, you can't drink any. Nothing else tastes the same. And I thought,
did it?
Yeah, and I was like, wow, like I kind of want to try it, but I kind of don't.
The nice thing about the 08 as well, you can only get them in magnums.
Yeah.
They're small bottles, so there's a lot to enjoy.
Yeah, that's very funny. Okay, so to bring the conversation more back to wine investment specifically, I know that you have a very strong opinion of what good looks like, how a strong asset selection process looks, and I would be very curious to hear more about your view, because for our viewers that may not be aware, at WineFi our approach is to provide the quantitative analysis that our data model provides with the qualitative expertise of Matthew and our broader investment committee. So I think it would be useful for the viewers to understand a little bit more about how you look at wine as an investable.
Well, I kind of look at fine wine through fundamentals. And I kind of alluded to this earlier. In my opinion, the number one driver of the price of a bottle of wine is the brand name, the producer, the chateau. And then after that, I'm looking at quality, which I put into two categories, or kind of combine them. One being point score. And there's some critics who have more influence in different regions than others. And then also vintage. So, for example, 100-point wine from a good vintage will cost more than 100-point wine from a lesser regarded vintage. And then the next thing is supply. So, for example, Dom Perignon make 1 million bottles a year. Investing in Dom Perignon, I wouldn't go until later vintages, just because there's so much supply in the early years that you may not see the price returns unless it's market-driven returns. So that'd be my kind of 3 main fundamentals. And then the kind of strategy that I've adopted is more of what you call a value investment strategy. So if it's got 3 very strong fundamentals and it's priced, say, considerably below its private market high price, then it starts becoming a bit more interesting. But then you can also tailor the whole approach to the individual. So what's your time horizon? What's your risk tolerance? And different regions can satisfy those requirements in different ways.
It's a great answer. Thank you very much.